Hi everyone, welcome to the second release that's part of our October Emotional Agility Month. Last week we briefly had a look at what emotional agility is, some of the key characteristics of people that are emotionally agile. We spoke a bit about stimulus reaction and the space in between. We covered off our emotional autopilot response to things that can sometimes get us hooked and how we naturally try to unhook ourselves. And you may have spent the last week being more attentive to those situations that do get you hooked and what you naturally gravitate towards to unhook yourself. At the end of this last video, we sort of did ask the question, is there a better way to unhook yourself that didn't involve brooding, bottling things up, or being incessantly hooked on happiness? And the answer is yes, there is. The first step to a better way is by showing up. This is the first step to learn to tame and accommodate those unwanted feelings caused by those unwanted circumstances without letting it dictate our life. We take a step to face up to, make peace with, and find an honest and open way to live with it. By simply facing up to the scary things that we experience in life and by giving it a name, we often strip it of its power. We end the tug of war by dropping the rope. Now learning to accept ourselves, warts and all, it helps to remind ourselves of one thing that all our favorite superheroes have in common, which is that we are far from perfect. The first thing that you can do to show up is to practice self-compassion with curiosity and an open acceptance. No failures, no regrets, no shame, and no guilt. Now, I'd like to think of yourself as the child that you once were. You didn't choose your life and you didn't choose your circumstances. Now, think of yourself as that hurt child. Would you first mock and berate that child, or would you offer comfort, compassion, and understanding? Practicing self-compassion doesn't mean that you're yielding a wrecking ball. It simply means that you're considering history and context to the emotions and feelings and then understanding how to make things better. When we show up to our emotions by practicing self-compassion, it is important to understand the difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is the feeling of burden or regret that comes from knowing that you've failed or you've done something wrong. It's focused on a specific misdeed, and like all emotions, it serves a purpose, which is usually a feeling that keeps us from repeating our mistakes. Now, shame is a different beast. It is linked to the feeling of disgust. Shame focuses on a person's character, and it casts us not as a person that did a bad thing, but as a person that is bad. So let's drill down a little bit further into self-compassion. First of all, it's not about lying to yourself. You're simply recognizing your faults and your failures as part of being human, and it gives us the freedom to redefine ourselves and our failures, which allows us to take risks and be truly creative. It also doesn't mean that you are weak or that you are lazy. You don't need to be tough on yourself to remain or keep your edge. And it definitely doesn't mean that you're deluding yourself. You have to be deeply aware of who you are, for better or worse, and be fully attuned to the world around you. And even if you are dealing with the world around you as it is, you have enormous leeway in how you respond to it. So now that we understand why self-compassion is so important, what it is and what it's not, we now need to choose willingness to label our emotions. But unfortunately, many adults still don't use words to describe their emotions. Alexithymia literally means no words for moods. It's not a clinical diagnosis, but it is something that affects millions of people. But learning to show up to your emotions with self-compassion, curiosity, and then taking it a step further to identify and label those emotions can be absolutely transformative. To help you with this, in this video, I have included a emotions chart. So the next time you have feelings such as frustration, anger, or happiness, try and spend a bit of time really identifying what these emotions are by using the chart or the table to label them. Our emotions are beacons, they are not barriers. They help us to identify what we care most about, and they motivate us to make positive changes. And then after a while, you can take a bit of time to understand what is the function of these emotions. What sits underneath all that frustration, that anger, or that joy. By showing up to our feelings, it can really help us to anticipate pitfalls and prepare more effective ways of coping during critical moments. Next week, we will be discussing the next step in becoming more emotionally agile, which is stepping out and creating that space in between. And as always, I really hope you've enjoyed today's topic. If this is something that you'd like to discuss further or it sparked a bit of curiosity within you, please reach out.